Biggest news of the week, probably Jim Harbaugh is officially the head coach of the Los Angeles Chargers. Not even a month later after winning the college football national championship, when he's getting asked on stage, hey, Jim, do you think you're going to be back with this Michigan team? Do you believe that you have coached your last game as a Michigan Wolverine? And we all knew that Harbaugh was going to leave, right? Like maybe there was a slight suspicion that some of us, not me, thought that Jim Harbaugh was going to go back and be a Michigan Wolverine again. But there was no sense for that at all. Jim Harbaugh has done everything he's done in Michigan. He's got he's got the Big Ten titles. He's got the wins against Ohio State. He brought back the players to finish unfinished business. He won the national championship. We saw him back at Stanford with Andrew Luck before he went to the NFL the first time and had that toolage in Andrew Luck. And we also saw Jim Harbaugh as well, 3 out of his 4 years with the Niners, 3 straight NFC championship games, gets let go in the last season, loses the Super Bowl with the Super Bowl I was just mentioning against the Baltimore Ravens. And we know that he had a little bit of the tie-up with the GM, and maybe the players weren't necessarily as receptive towards the end of his tenure, even though how couldn't you be 3 straight NFC title games? But excuse me, let's not forget that the San Francisco 49ers had 8 straight losing, disappointing-ass seasons before Jim Harbaugh got there. But Jim Harbaugh said, oh, no, let's enjoy the day. Let's not talk about that right now. Let's just let this be right now. And in that moment, I knew he just doesn't want to break the news yet. He doesn't want to let Go Blue down like that shortly after such a budding time. And Jim Harbaugh is one of the best college coaches we've ever seen. Jim Harbaugh was one of the best college coaches of the last 10, 12 years that he's been with Michigan. We understand that Jim Harbaugh going to the Chargers is really going to change this franchise, because this is a starved LA, formerly San Diego Chargers football franchise. And I love this hire. If I'm a Chargers fan, I'm ecstatic about this. NFL Mike, shout out to you, bro. One of my favorite content creators out there. I'm so blessed and grateful that we met each other and we've been able to stay in touch. I know you're ecstatic about this, man. You should be, because this franchise has been mishandled for a while, between the Anthony Lynn days, the Brandon Staley days, the Mike McCoy days. I mean, you just go back and look. Mike McCoy, 28 and 38 from 2013 to 2016. Anthony Lynn from 2017 to 2020, 34 and 32. Brandon Staley, who I really thought was going to be able to be that guy and have that breakthrough. That's also when we figured out that defensive-minded head coaches don't make it happen. Brandon Staley with a 500 record of 24 and 24. And then they bring in the grown-up in Jim Harbaugh to finally give them, some of that clarity there. Jim Harbaugh is a guy that can really speak to his players. He resonates with these players. This defense has been horrible over the last few years, especially with the most money spent in defensive free agency, the most expensive defensive roster, with a defensive-minded head coach, and it took your division rivals dropping a 60 bomb on your head in order for the Chargers to finally grow up, let you go, and in a way, I'm kind of shocked that the Chargers pulled this off. I'm really shocked that the Chargers pulled this off, because they've been lost at head coach since Mike McCoy. You go back and look at some of the head coaches before. Yes, there was the greatness of Norv Turner with the Phillip River days. We saw the Marty Schottenheimer days as well, or June Jones, Kevin Gilbride, not very much of anything. Now, we do want to give credit to Bobby Ross, of course, because he did take the franchise to their lone Super Bowl appearance. Of course, they did end up losing in that game, but we got Coryell and Gilman as well. They also did their jobs. You go take a look at their records and what they did for the franchise. Sid Gilman from 1960 to 69, and then in 1971, an 87, 57, and 6 record. Don Coryell with the 72 and 60 record from 78 to 86. So outside of just a few coaches, which is usually how it goes, right, for an NFL franchise, they've been lost at head coach, and they've been waiting for this type of guy to jump in that's really going to be able to mesh with the players, because we saw the turnaround that San Francisco had. That defense, I mean, you're talking Navarro Bowman, Patrick Willis. God, of course, I'm drawing a blank on some of these names. I was literally just rattling them through my head before I got on the show. I was listening to another show, and they were just talking about all of the players that Harbaugh actually had with that defense, and we saw them turn it around. We also saw that offense jump immediately back into production as well. And we saw that San Francisco 49ers team be turned around. And I do think Jim Harbaugh, again, is a fantastic hire. Fantastic hire. But this team still needs to stay healthy. Because when's the last time we remember Keenan Allen being healthy, very effective for a full 16, 17, 18, maybe 19 games if you need him in the playoffs? Same thing with Austin Eckler. Same thing, especially with Joey Bosa. Your star players, it's been a struggle to keep these guys healthy. And I think that's why the Anthony Lynn's and, especially Anthony Lynn and Brandon Staley, they haven't been able to put up with healthy guys year in and year out. And that's what I always said. And now we have Justin Herbert being injured as well. I think that, Justin Herbert will come back just fine. He'll come back very healthy. He'll be okay. But these guys got to stay healthy. You can have the best things in the world, but the best ability is availability. And if the Chargers don't have that, despite this great hire in Jim Harbaugh, how much is he really going to be able to turn things around? How effective will he really be if his star players are not on the field? Now, thankfully, reportedly, he's bringing his defensive coordinator, Jesse Minter, with him and his strength and conditioning coach, which I think the big emphasis on strength and conditioning coach. I love that the defensive coordinator is going to come over as well because we know Jim Harbaugh is very defensive. He's going to get a hold of a Derwin James, of a Joey Bosa, of a Asante Samuel Jr. He's going to get a hold of these guys. He's going to get this defense back right because they were absolutely horrible, dead last in the NFL in yards per game given up defensively. Versus we see Jim Harbaugh come over from Michigan and him working with Jesse Minter, 10.4 points per game, which led the nation by far, first in the nation in college football. Now, how fast is Jim Harbaugh really going to turn things around? I give him 2 years. I don't think it's going to be a first year, immediate AFC title game, immediate Super Bowl berth, kind of like we saw with Joe Burrow. Or even when we saw Sean Payton first year with the Saints. Of course, I'm going to throw my Saints in there on a reference whenever I can. Because Jim Harbaugh, he has to change this culture. He has to change this culture with the Los Angeles Chargers. There's no more blowing 27-point leads with your star quarterback. Or your defense, of course, with Brandon Staley. Brandon Staley should have been fired after that. There's no more of that. There's no more letting up 60-plus points to your division rival and melting before the injury in a season where you had high expectations. I had high expectations for the LA Chargers. I think a lot of us, especially over the last couple of years, have had very high expectations. Now, it's not as much of a cleanup job as Sean Payton had to do with the Broncos because we know that Justin Herbert is very young. He's already been paid. But this franchise needs a culture change. I think within the first or second year, I see so take that back about what I said of not being, I overread my notes a little bit, kind of just getting caught up, talking without making my references, which is, of course, why I make them for the show. I think within the first to second year, realistically, he can get to an AFC championship game. By year 3, I see a Super Bowl appearance. Now, I'm not saying a Super Bowl win. I think it's going to take a little more heavy lifting to really get this Chargers team to not even buy into Jim Harbaugh, but just to get that model and level of consistency because they're loaded on both sides of the ball. They've had a loaded roster for the last 5 years. We remember when they had Phillip Rivers at quarterback. It felt like the Chargers had 2 of everything. Oh, they also need to keep Mike Williams healthy as well. They also need to get to development out of Quentin Johnston as well. They also need to turn that defense around majorly as well, which is why I think it'll take 2, maybe 3 years. But I see a lot of progress for this team in 2 years. I could easily see a wild card or a divisional appearance. I could see them winning a wild card game, and anything can happen in the divisional. So maybe they do sneak into that AFC title game. But I do believe that Jim Harbaugh can take the Los Angeles Chargers back to the Super Bowl and win said Super Bowl. Because he's got Justin Herbert. He's got stars. He's bringing over his defensive coordinator that just absolutely rocked it in college football. He's off of a national championship. He's off of beating Alabama and Ohio State and Washington. He's off of all that. And now he's back in the league to really make his mark. Now, why did he choose the LA Chargers? I think the answer there is very simple because we know the Falcons interviewed Jim Harbaugh as well. I thought the Falcons should have pushed all their chips into the middle of the table to sign Jim Harbaugh, but that is what that is. He signed with the Chargers. I mean, let's just think about it really. LA versus Atlanta. I'm probably going to choose LA because of the way the weather is most of the time, the beaches. There's a lot to do in LA. It's not to say there's not to do in Atlanta. I'm just an hour south of Atlanta here in metro Atlanta, here in Georgia. But I've also been to Los Angeles as well. I've also been to the beautiful state of California. And excluding money, which Jim Harbaugh does not need to worry about, he chose a better scenery. But not only did he choose the better scenery, when you're looking between the Falcons and the Chargers, which I think were by far the two most attractive jobs, loaded rosters on both sides of the ball. We know that Falcons defense with Jesse Bates and AJ Terrell. And if Jeff Okuda can get healthy, we know about the Calais Campbells and the David Onyemadas and the Grady Jarretts of the world and the Caden Ellises of the world. But the quarterback situation, and also we know the offensive side of the ball as well with Kyle Pitts, Bijan Robinson, Drake London, Tyler Algier. Solid offensive line. But if this situation did not show us that quarterback has and always will be the most important position for a team and a deciding factor when it comes to a sexy coaching job, this situation should have laid it out for you here. He didn't want the pressure, possibly, speculation, of course, is what we do. He didn't possibly want that pressure of having to handle that 8th overall pick right out the gate. Not that he couldn't handle it, because I have faith in Jim Harbaugh. I think a lot of people would have faith in Jim Harbaugh to make that right decision with the 8th overall pick at the Falcons. But there's no identity with the quarterback position of the Falcons. We know that Bijan and Tyler Algier are going to get their touches and get their licks. But Kyle Pitts is still being figured out. Drake London is still a little bit, in a way, being figured out. And yes, there's been a Taylor Heineke. And there's been a Desmond Ridder. But when you look at the other side with Justin Herbert, who's clearly a top 10 quarterback in this league. I know he doesn't have a playoff win yet. Very unfortunate. That streak will change with Jim Harbaugh. When you look at the fact that Justin Herbert was also already signed, he's already got his money. He's already paid, Brinks truck backed up, give me the bag. So Harbaugh already walks into a situation of where Justin Herbert's identity has been established and his place on the salary cap and roster has been carved out with the numbers. Not that the other quarterbacks in Atlanta didn't, but it's more set in stone here. When you have a franchise quarterback who's elite like Justin Herbert and who maybe can already hit another peak, he's already thrown for 5,000 yards. If he hits another peak under Jim Harbaugh, what more are we going to say about Jim? Or rather, how many more positive things in a great way are we going to say about Jim Harbaugh? Because we already feel like, Justin Herbert's made. But now with Jim Harbaugh jumping in, it's going to be great. It's going to be absolutely great. Again, I give it 2 years, 3 at the most before they're really making noise. I really see it within that 2-year situation. But Jim Harbaugh is officially a Los Angeles Charger. We know they were going back and forth. They were saying they were very close in striking distance. They figured it out. He is with the Los Angeles Chargers. Chargers fans should be ecstatic. And realistically, why wouldn't they be? Why wouldn't they be? They just got the hottest head coaching candidate on the market, fresh off of a national championship, and probably the entire starting 11 of that Michigan defense will be day 2 or 3 picks at the worst. At the worst. Welcome to the new era, LA Chargers. I'm happy as hell for you guys.